Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it very much. So,
sure, Jack, anytime.
Less than 6 weeks until the end of the regular session, and I'm wondering what priorities in the Senate of yours and the top 30 are you concerned will not pass in the House?
You know, the question, Jack, is really the clock. The House has been, they're catching up. They have been pretty far behind in hearing and passing bills over to us. And so you get down to the last, it's really not 6 weeks because the last week there's some deadlines and bills have to be in one chamber or the other. So it's really about 5 weeks. And our top 30 priorities after today, we will have passed out 29. We had passed out 26 last week at that point in time. So all of our priorities will be out and to them. Obviously, these are my priorities, the governor's priorities. Some we share with the House. We have a different view on those, but mostly it's the people's priorities. You know, we get our ideas from when we're out there meeting folks and listening to folks and people that come to the Capitol. So it's the people's priorities. And I am concerned the clock will run out on getting them all accomplished, but I just don't know which ones may not make the deadline.
Last week, you drew a political line in the sand when it came to property tax relief, and that you were not going to negotiate when it comes to the increasing the homestead exemptions that were passed by the Senate. Since then, have you had a chance to speak with Speaker Phelan directly and with Governor Abbott during your weekly breakfasts?
So I have spoken. I met with the governor this week. Dade and I have not sat down this week, but our teams and our staffs and different members are communicating, and that's what happens a lot, Jack. It's senator to senator, it's staff to staff very often as you go through that process. Jack, let me tell you why I'm holding firm on the homestead exemption. When I was elected, the homestead exemption was $15,000 in 2015 as lieutenant governor. It had been that way forever. I increased it to $25,000. And I don't normally say it's always a we, but it was something that I really wanted to do. And the Senate did it and the House agreed. And then last year we increased it to 40. And this year we want to increase the homestead exemption for everyone under 65 by 70,000. And for seniors 65 and over, 100,000, Jack. Now, let me tell you what that means. That means for every senior, that's about $1,000 a year, a little bit more than that, for as long as they keep their home. Hope you can see the money right there. I'm holding $1,000 in my hand. So if a senior keeps their home, say 15 years until they're 80, some less, some more, I'm just using an average of 15 years, that's $15,000, Jack, that the House does not have in their budget. And for everyone under 65, it's $800 for every year they homestead their home. And a lot of that is a 30-year mortgage. So that's about $25,000, not in the House bill, it's in the Senate bill, because appraisal caps don't impact taxes anymore. It could a little bit in some cases, but the bill we passed, Jack, in 2019 essentially takes the appraisals out of the equation. But the bottom line is this: the Senate plan delivers about $27 billion more in tax savings because of the homestead exemption. And when people under 65 say, why the seniors get more, there's always been a higher exemption for seniors. They get a little bit more, but $15,000 for every senior, $25,000 over a 30-year mortgage for every person under 65. Jack, I'm not walking away from that. You can't argue math. Both the Senate and the House have a lot of compression in there, which reduces the school rate. Both of us have some issues we can agree on, I think, can come together. But the appraisal cap at 5%, Jack, does nothing for a senior because seniors' appraisals are already capped. So they get nothing out of that. And seniors represent over 2 million of our nearly 6 million homes. So I can't walk away from $27 billion in extra savings over the time and the life of their home while they live in it, because the House just doesn't understand math.
Does the governor support the Senate version or the House version?
Jack, you always ask me to answer questions about what other people do. Just ask me where I am, because that would be unfair for me to talk about conversations. The governor wants us to give the biggest savings we can to property owners and homeowners, and that's what we're going to do.
Is there room?
And Jack, let me make this one point to really clarify this, since I know the elongated version, people can listen to this part of it. The reason the 5% doesn't work anymore is because in 19, we separated appraisals from your tax bill. It used to be if your appraisal went up 7, 8, 9, 10%, so did your tax bill. But when people look at the appraisals that their homes went up last spring and their final tax bill in October, they'll see their appraisals went up, but their tax bill was much lower because we disconnected that. And the way we did that is we said, counties cannot increase their budgets more than 3.5% and school districts more than 2.5%. So as your value goes up, Jack, like a seesaw, they have to lower the rate to get to 3.5%. That's why the appraisals, essentially, there always can be an exception, an outlier somewhere, really don't factor. And again, seniors get no benefit from the house plan. So that's why I'm sticking tight. This is a lot of money, $25,000 over a lifetime of a mortgage for someone under 65 and $15,000 for a senior over, say, a 15-year time they live in their home over 65. You can't walk away from that, Jack. It's real money, a lot of money.
Let me ask you about school choice. Given the fact that the
Yes.
House passed an amendment saying no taxpayer funds will be used for education savings accounts, how concerned are you that the school choice education savings accounts is going to be dead on arrival in the House? And what do you make of Governor Abbott's statewide tour promoting school choice?
So I appreciate the governor out there working while the Senate's here passing school choice. We just passed the biggest school choice bill in the country several weeks ago. So it just passed. We passed most of our priorities out, Jack, as you know, 2 and 3 weeks ago. We're just finishing up the last several bills in the last week or so. So these bills have been over there. Look, 80%, Jack, of Republicans support parental choice, which includes school choice. About 60 to 65% of independents and almost 50% of Democrats support parental choice. It's the ultimate choice. But we also know this, Jack, from looking at all of the other states, Florida has had school choice the longest. On average, about 3 or 4% of parents and students decide to opt for an education savings account, which we're creating, of $8,000 for a person to use for a private school of their choice. And the reason only 3 or 4% pick up, Jack, is like Texas. You know, we have some really great public schools. Most of them are good, but some are failures. And so those that can't help the student in the eyes of the parent reach their goals and get a quality education, they're the ones who move. Often children with disabilities that a particular school can't help, they move. And then today, Jack, the number one reason that parents are opting for school choice are the pornography that's in the school libraries, that's in libraries in general, what's being taught in schools for young children on sex and gender. They don't want it. So the number one issue in America, the parents want choices, as they say, the immorality that's taught in some of our schools. And again, it's not everywhere, but I will tell you, Jack, we passed the library bill last week on school libraries. Jack, I have books in my hand. I don't think your TV station would allow me to show you the graphic pictures that are there for middle school students and copy. And I'm not saying this is what the book says. The book says porno is sweet and sugary. They direct children to find kinky websites where they can live out their fantasies. This is for middle school children. Parents are revolting against this, Jack. Now, I'm very optimistic, more than I've ever been in the House, that we may get a school choice bill out from them. I don't know what it will look like. We'll have to go to conference and work it out. But I'm optimistic because that vote, when you look at the technical side of the vote, it's much closer to happening than ever before, but we'll see what happens.
I wanted to ask you about school safety and security. Senate
Yeah.
Bill 11 looks like it may pass today in the Senate.
Yes,
Are
it
you
will pass.
Are you satisfied that there is enough teeth in that legislation to make sure that school districts are complying with the provisions, for example, the security audits and other provisions in there to keep these campuses as safe as possible?
So Jack, it's like any other law we pass. It depends on the people following it. And in this case, we're putting, and we agree with the House on this. I think we're both around the same number of $1.5 billion, closer to $1.5 billion to spend on school security. But let me tell you what, Jack, you can have all the security that you can spend on. But if someone leaves a side door open of a school building, then the whole thing breaks down. I was in Santa Fe when that tragedy happened years ago. I happened to be near the school that day. I was one of the first people there on the scene. And I immediately looked at the school and said, there's too many doors here. There's just too many doors. And we put in $100 million, Jack, back then for school security. And when Uvalde happened, there was still 15 million that had not been taken down by school districts around the state, including Uvalde itself, had not used all the money that was allotted to their school. And as we know, that shooter that day Uvalde came in through a door that was unlocked and open because, or that he could get into because it was unlocked, a side door, because they were waiting for a caterer that day to bring food for a school party at the end of the season. So Jack, we can do everything we can, but we need every teacher, every student, every principal, every superintendent to buy in to maximize everything we can. So we're all in to do this. We allow school districts that want to allow teachers to carry. We allow them to use metal detectors. I helped put metal detectors in Santa Fe. My wife and I bought some of those metal detectors, and the company dedicated the rest of those. They're working well down there. But a lot of school districts say, we don't want metal detectors. Our parents don't want it. We don't want to look like a prison. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. So we have over 8,000 campuses, Jack. We can give them the money. We can give them the recommendations that Robert Nichols has in his bill, but they have to follow through. Our teachers and our students deserve to be safe.
But doesn't
the parents need to know their children are safe? Sorry.
But no, it's okay. But doesn't the bill have compliance requirements in there so that school districts have to do that?
Yeah, Jack, we do everything we can on a lot of issues. I'll simplify this. We have bills here that say it's illegal to speed. People speed. We have bills that say you can't rob a bank. People rob banks. I mean, we can pass laws, but we have to have the follow-up. In this case, we'll follow up with our schools and ask them to be accountable to do all of these things. But there are 8,000 campuses out there, and we have to depend on parents. We have to depend on those who run those school districts and those schools to follow up and let us know when things don't happen. We don't have 8,000 inspectors to go to every school, so they have to use the funding wisely as we recommend, and we will, and the TA will hold them accountable. No, look, every superintendent, every principal, every teacher wants to do their very best to save and protect their children, but we have to take this serious because we've heard it every time. We never thought it would happen here. We have to get beyond that thinking.
I wanted to ask you about a difference in the bills between the Senate and the House on increasing the penalty to a felony for illegal voting. Both the Senate, you passed Senate Bill 2 very early on.
First bill I think we passed.
And the difference with the House bill that's working its way through right now is in the Senate, the bill says ignorance is not a defense for someone who's ineligible to vote. The House is going to keep the intent that was passed in 2021 in its version. So
yeah, well, Jack, first of all, let me go ahead, finish your question.
My question is, thank you so much. Why is intent not important at this time?
Jack, first of all, and you're a great reporter, you ask great questions, but remember, every one of these bills, and we get questions, the reason I said let's talk later in the session than early, it's a process, Jack, and bills go through, they're filed, they're amended in one chamber, amended on the floor, go to the other house, and then they go to conference. So we'll see what the final language is. Here's the bottom line, Jack. Back in the last session, we passed the strongest election integrity bill in the country. And the House amended, and this is why I say it's a process, on the last day or so to reduce the crime of voter fraud from a felony that it had always been a felony, Jack, always been a felony, to a Class A misdemeanor. And then we went into a special session. Neither the governor or I were happy about that. That's not what was in the bill. And so the governor put it on a special session call to restore it back, which we did last time. We restored it. And the House just said, we don't have time to deal with it. So they've stayed at Class A misdemeanor. So in terms of the language and what you're trying to get into the weeds, the important weeds, by the way, that will all work itself out. But I'm glad the House understands we have to restore it back to a felony. It should have never been reduced to begin with.
Was there a recommendation by the Attorney General to reduce it to a misdemeanor? Because
absolutely. Look, I can't speak for him. Absolutely not, as far as I know. In fact, Jack, there was another, I call it a poison pill. Poison pill in a bill is when you really weaken it. And so there was another poison pill that would have really taken the Attorney General out of going after voter fraud. And I know it clearly because I worked with the Attorney General that next to last day in the regular session. And he actually wrote a letter to the Speaker and said, if you don't fix this, I won't be able to prosecute voter fraud at all. And so they did change that, but there were two poison pills in that bill. One was to reduce from a felony to a Class A misdemeanor, and the other was to take the Attorney General out of the equation. Now, since then, a court has taken the Attorney General out of the equation, and we're trying to correct that.
Two other questions, if I may, and I appreciate your time.
Sure.
One is on local control. A bill
Yes.
passed yesterday in the House that would basically preempt various local regulations and try to make it more consistent for businesses to operate from city to city. How do you respond to mayors of cities who've criticized this and saying you're taking away the city's individual power to improve their cities for citizens?
So the answer is very simple. Texans need to know what the law is pretty much consistently across the state. When you go from city to city and you travel wherever you may, or if you have a business and you're opening another town. And when one city is drastically different than another, it makes it difficult for the citizens and businesses in order to run their businesses. But most importantly, Jack, and this was mostly in big blue cities that had all types of mandates, and Houston and Harris County were two of the worst, quite frankly, with the county judge down there, Lena Hidalgo, just pretty much taking over people's lives. Look, the state of Texas, at the end of the day, all the people who vote for a mayor or vote for a county judge or commissioner, they also vote for us, as statewide officials, the governor, myself, and those of us who run statewide. So when they say, well, get out of our business, I represent those voters too. And those voters reach out to us. And many aren't happy, particularly in big blue cities, of some of those ordinances that are passed or some of those things that occurred during COVID. So that's why we pass, that's why we support this bill.
And I wanted to ask you.
Time for your last question. Okay.
Yes. And I wanted to ask you, is any effort to legalize sports betting in Texas and creation of casino resorts in various parts of the state, is that just dead on arrival in the Senate?
So, Jack, here's what I've said since last November. We just don't have the votes for it in the Senate. And the best example of that, and you know how the process works, no one ever filed a bill in the Senate for casinos. That means if a casino bill comes over, there's no one who even wanted to file one, no one to pick up the bill. So, and the reason it wasn't filed is because a senator who was thinking about it couldn't find any votes for it. We do have a sports betting bill that was filed, but as my vote count, and my vote counts better than anyone's because I know what people tell me, we have 2 votes for it. In this Texas Senate, you need 18 votes to bring a bill to the floor. And I'm just counting Republicans because we're not going to let the Democrats take the lead on this and pass a bill with their majority. We're a Republican state. So you have to have 2/3 vote, Jack, for a constitutional amendment, and that would be 21 votes. And right now, of my 19 Republican senators, only 2 say that they would vote for it. So you can run the math here, Jack. No votes for casinos. No one's asked me. No one has said they want to support it. And 2 votes for sports betting.
And you don't support it either, right?
Jack, I've never said where I am. What I've always said, because here's the trick, Jack. If I were to say, well, I'll look at a bill if the members want it. Well, then the lobbyists, and they have almost 100 lobbyists between the two. The casinos, I think, have 80 lobbyists. They would just be, if you were a senator, Jack, they'd be in your office. Well, the lieutenant governor said he's for it. Or the lieutenant governor said he'll look at a bill, and then they put pressure on you. So I don't put pressure on my members to say I'm for or against something that's an issue that a lot of people feel strongly about on both sides. I let them make the decision and have that freedom. And I told the casinos, and I've told the sports owners, I've met with them all. I said, if I have 15 or 16 of my 19 Republican senators who come to me and say, hey, I've got the votes for it, that's when they'll find out where I stand. But I don't put that kind of pressure on the members. Jack, my form of leadership is listen to the people. Where's the high ground on the issues? What do the people want us to do? Where are the members? What are the big issues important to them? And I will tell you that, well, again, some people are strongly against it. Some people are strongly for it. The bottom line is it's not on the top 25 of anybody's list for anything. They're worried about getting more property tax relief that we're going to give them in our bill. They're worried about school choice. They're worried about the grid, which we haven't talked about. We need more natural gas power. They're worried about pornographic books in their school libraries. Jack. They're worried about drag queen shows for kids. They're worried about gender modification surgery on children. They're worried about defunding police in big cities. They're worried about a whole host of things. And building a casino or betting on a sports app is not on that list of anyone in terms of being one of their top priorities. Not in the Senate anyway.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Hey, Jack, thank you all. Appreciate it.